The story begins with the life of an elf, often thought to be the epitome of peace and serenity. In the forest, food is abundant, fruits hang heavy from the trees, and there is no real need to hunt. Bows exist not for survival, but for practice and refinement. With the blessing of the spirits, elves can glimpse the truth of the world, and thus their lives flow in harmony with nature.
Boring!
Yet for one young elf, this idyllic existence was nothing short of suffocating. Though his body was that of a child, his mind held the wisdom and weariness of a 30-year-old man from another world. After more than a century of eating fruit, listening to the same stories, and living the same unchanging days, he was exhausted. Unlike the other elves,
It should have been me, not him! It's not fair!
who knew no different and found joy in the forest, he remembered his past life, a world filled with invention, variety, and endless stimulation. Compared to that, this peaceful life felt unbearably dull.
What's this, you What's this?
High elves do not age as humans do. They live for thousands of years, and when their bodies finally perish, their souls linger as spirits until the end of the world. But after only 100 years, the boy already felt he was nearing his breaking point. He longed for something more than fruit, and routinely longed to experience the unknown before his soul was forever bound to the world. He called upon the wind spirit, but instead of asking for guidance or comfort, he confessed his boredom and his decision to leave.
Are you sure about that?
Fuck this shit, I'm out.
Time passed, and the boy trimmed his hair, remarking to himself that he even felt lighter now. Having lived all his life deep within the forest, he had little idea of what awaited him beyond the elven barrier. After dressing, he readied himself to depart. He admitted there was no one he truly wished to say farewell to, but believed that, if fate allowed, their paths would cross again. For now, he carried his bow and arrows, a satchel filled with provisions, and, of course, a knife. Half a month had passed.
Fuck this shit, I'm out.
From the moment he stepped beyond the forest barrier, danger was everywhere. Wolves ambushed him among the trees, monsters lurked by the river, and even fish would occasionally bite him. Yet, despite the constant threats, he found everything utterly fascinating. He began examining the wolf claws he'd collected, imagining what he could craft from them. Larger fangs could become daggers, smaller ones could be tied together. Perhaps it was finally time to learn some basic crafting. As he wandered, Asura found himself captivated by the horizon, the way it seemed to stretch endlessly, making the world feel infinite. Soon, he arrived at a city gate, where a human guard stopped him.
Give me your money.
What?
Just give me my money.
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
At that moment, a group of adventurers approached, and a girl stepped forward. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" she asked.
You trying to get freaky or what?
The girl gently took his hand and led him aside, studying him intently. "Are you a high elf?" she asked, her eyes lingering on the faint, shimmering aura around him, a light said to be the mark of an immortal soul. Asura, caught off guard, realized he had never intended to conceal his identity. The girl asked why a high elf would come to a human city. "I got bored of the forest," Asura replied simply.
Really, nigga?
He told her to call him Asura. That was the name by which he had been called in his village. Upon hearing it, her expression shifted to one of disappointment, which Asura immediately noticed. She apologized for the assumption, but insisted that fate had brought them together and offered to help him. Asura smiled. "Thank you, that would be great, but there's no need to call me noble." In a gesture of respect, she kissed his hand. Asura blinked in confusion, thinking a handshake would have been sufficient. Though touched by her kindness, he still planned to slip through the gate and disappear as soon as he could. Back at the gate, she handed over the coins without hesitation. A man from her group then explained that they were a 6-star adventurer party, a rank reserved for the best of the best, with beginners only reaching 1 star and very few ever attaining 7. You're free to enter, but if you cause any trouble, your guarantor will be held responsible. Asura took a deep breath and read the posted city rules. The guard then handed Asura a document and asked him to write his name. As he wrote, the man introduced himself. "I'm Rodner," he said. "If any problems arise, you can come looking for me." With that, he opened the gate, welcomed him to the city of Vistcourt.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
Asura stepped inside and was immediately struck by the city's vastness and vibrancy. He began to move forward, but the girl stopped him. "Do you have any plans for the future?" she asked.
Mind your business!
"If not, perhaps you should consider registering as an adventurer to obtain an ID." Asura paused, attentive. What he truly wanted was to find a way to make use of the forest wolf parts he had collected. "I want to visit a blacksmith," he said. "Where can I find the best one in town?" The girl's face fell. "The best blacksmith is a dwarf," she explained, "and he certainly wouldn't sell anything to an elf. According to legend, dwarves defile the sanctity of nature by stealing fire and locking it away in their forges. Elves and dwarves don't get along." Asura's expression lit up. "That's perfect," he said. "I was hoping to find a dwarf anyway. If you don't want to come with me, at least tell me where the shop is." The girl blinked in astonishment. "You don't hate dwarves?" Asura shrugged. "Why should I hate someone I don't even know?" He reflected for a moment. Elves dislike dwarves and their metal tools because metallurgy frightens the trees of the forest. I can understand axes being a problem, but what's so scary about cutlery? I just thought we hated dwarves, and that was that. Before the discussion could continue, night finally arrived. Asura said he wanted to stay at an inn, but didn't have any money yet. "Could you buy a fruit from me?" he asked the girl. Handing her the item, he added, "Humans can probably make a rejuvenation elixir with this. It should help at least a little." The girl gasped as she saw what he had given her. It was an apoa fruit. Asura explained that apoa fruits were an elf's favorite food, and that Irina had helped him into the city, offering to give her the fruit for free. Her surprise deepened. The protagonist, seemingly oblivious to the situation, continued smiling. "Don't go showing that off," she scolded gently. "Tomorrow, I'll have to teach you about money and how to live among humans. The blacksmith will have to wait. Do you understand?" Asura nodded, thinking that he had much to learn from her. The scene then shifted to a different location. Asura entered a house and, hearing a noise, assumed the owner was busy. He began admiring a sword on display. Soon, the blacksmith appeared, apologizing for the delay. He studied Asura and commented, "You have a good eye, young man." Then the blacksmith stared at him, a scowl forming. "What is a filthy elf like you doing in my shop? I have nothing to sell you." Asura paused for a moment, but then smiled politely. "Good day," he said warmly. He looked at a dagger on the table. "This is very good," he remarked, though he had no intention of buying it. Instead, he reached into his bag and pulled out a bottle of beer. "I brought a small gift." The dwarf raised an eyebrow. And what could an elf possibly know about good beer? Even so, Asura kept smiling like a fool, a wide, unrestrained grin that made the dwarf frown in curiosity. "If you're not here to buy anything," the blacksmith asked, "then why are you here?" Asura placed an item on the table. "It's a forest wolf fang," he explained. "I took it down myself, and I want to make a knife out of it. I didn't want any part of the animal to go to waste." The dwarf examined the fang carefully, his brow furrowing. "Are you insane?" he asked. "A fang that size could only come from a giant wolf. That's not something an amateur could work with." "Exactly," Asura replied. "That's why I want to learn from the most skilled dwarf in the city. And since I can't use the pelt, I at least want to make something of the claws and fangs." The dwarf was silent for a moment, seemingly at a loss. Finally, he said, "I'd be able to work on it myself, and with your strength, you'd make good money as an adventurer." Asura's eyes widened. "Does that mean you'd be willing to craft weapons for me?" The dwarf grunted, but before he could answer, Asura continued, "I'm not interested in becoming an adventurer. I want to be a blacksmith, and I'd train for 10, maybe 20 years if you accept me as your apprentice." The old man's jaw dropped. "You're completely insane," he muttered, shaking his head. Then, almost grudgingly, he added, "But madness I can handle better than arrogance." "Very well, I'll take you on. It would be a waste for materials like that to go unused." Asura extended his hand toward the dwarf. The man blinked in surprise, but seeing the boy's joyful expression, found he couldn't refuse. Later, Irina, having heard of Asura's exploits, asked why he was working at a dwarf shop. Asir, puzzled by her concern, replied simply, "It's the best way to earn money."
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
The and you arranged was generous, but once I can support myself, I'll pay you back. Irina shook her head firmly. No, you can't just let a dwarf touch you. The trees will be frightened, and the spirits will hate you. What if they abandon you? Asir laughed softly. You're completely mistaken. Spirits don't hate the smell of metal. Trees dislike being chopped with axes, but they're not fragile. If we keep at least one potted plant nearby, I'm sure I can get along with the spirits here. At that moment, the dwarf appeared in the doorway. Asir turned to him. Do you mind if I place a plant pot in the shop? The man said nothing. Asir interpreted the silence as permission and grinned. Looking at Irene, he said, Since you're here, you should at least buy something. That dagger, see this one? It's mine recommendation. Irene studied the weapon, impressed. It's excellent. I know it's made by dwarves, but would you be upset if I bought it? Asir shook his head with a smile. I'll only be upset if you neglect its care. Treat it well. Irene blinked, taken aback. You notice things I could never see. No, the things I didn't try to see. She turned back to him and promised to take care of it. Meanwhile, the dwarf watched the entire exchange, quietly surprised. He had never imagined that such a small gesture could help ease the long-standing tension between elves and dwarves. Yet, seeing a high-quality weapon wielded by a capable adventurer was enough to satisfy him. Time passed, and Asir continued living in the city for an entire year. Irina and her team frequently visited the workshop to buy and repair equipment, which not only increased business, but also attracted more customers and even employees. Over time, Asir himself became capable of simple tasks. The scarcity of metal had caused him frustration at first, and nails were the most he could produce. Despite the simplicity of the work, he found it enjoyable, and the more he worked, the more money he earned. Still, Irina covered most of his living expenses. Based on her teachings about the value of money, Asir realized that his lodging cost around 50,000 yen per night. He often tried to hand the payment to Irina, but she insisted that he was already teaching her about spirits in exchange. Asir once complained to Rodner about this, but the man only laughed. The elven lady is your guarantor, Rodner said. She isn't about to leave you on your own. If you want to pay your way, find a safe place, and that should ease her mind as well. As he settled into life, Asir began reflecting on his companions. He felt truly blessed by the friendships he had formed. Currently, Irina and the others were away on a long-term mission, and he planned to discuss certain matters with her once they returned, confident she would agree. One day, someone entered the workshop. Asir called out to the girl, Martina, welcoming her back. He tried to ask where Irina had been, but Martina, clearly desperate, said she urgently needed his help with a spirit that had gone out of control. Asir's eyes widened. He grabbed her by the shoulder. We should talk somewhere else, he said, and the scene shifted to another location. Martina explained that they had received a request from the city of Gerald, over 2 weeks away. Irene had been specifically requested because it involved a spirit. According to Martina, the Galeard River had been contaminated, and the water spirit had become violent. One of the city's residents had angered the spirit, and anyone who drank the water fell ill. Oddly, while more and more fish were dying, the surrounding vegetation remained completely unaffected. It seemed impossible for a water spirit to pollute the water it inhabited. This wasn't a curse, it was pollution. Geralt was a newly established city, founded 10 years ago, where rich mineral deposits had been discovered. The pollution caused by mana disruption was being mistakenly blamed on the water spirit. Curious, Asir asked about the Lord of Geralt. Martina explained that a newly appointed noble family, chosen by the king, now governed the city. They were eager to expand mining operations. Asir suspected that the Lord of Geralt might actually understand the problem, but was deflecting blame, or perhaps he didn't even realize it was an environmental issue. Martina continued, saying that Irene was doing everything she could to calm the vengeful spirit in Geralt, while Kreyas had stayed behind to protect them just in case. Asir thought to himself as he listened. She had rushed all that way just to ask for his help. This was clearly a serious situation. He noted that Irene's ability to communicate with spirits was steadily growing. It was reassuring to know that, even under these circumstances, if her only goal had been to fulfill the request, she could have simply destroyed the water where the spirit resided, temporarily preventing it from affecting the world. Yet, Asir admired her choice to confront the problem differently. Her first instinct was to befriend the creature, and he was genuinely pleased by that. "I'll help," Asir said. "I offer my assistance freely, but we'll need to speak with one more person first." Dwarves have worked with metals since ancient times and possess deep knowledge of their harmful effects. "We need an experienced dwarf's guidance." The scene shifted, and the dwarf listened intently. "I understand what you're saying," he said. "If someone from the blacksmithing guild investigates, the truth will surely reach the king." Then he paused and added, "But I'll look into it myself." The two companions were taken aback by his decisiveness. Asir explained that he only needed the dwarf to assign a guild member, as he couldn't leave the shop unattended for too long. "We'll handle the rest," he said. But the dwarf shook his head firmly. The guild's findings might never reach the king, but the words of a dwarven blacksmith carry weight. Dwarves wield great influence within the guild, and many are members. And frankly, there's no dwarf who would easily listen to an elf. Time passed. Discussions continued, with someone noting that if the mines shut down, the price of metals would skyrocket. Another added that such a shortage would prompt new mines to spring up, directly affecting them all. The group was already preparing to depart. The dwarf declared that he would first travel to the guild in the royal capital. The scene shifted again. Asir reflected that, although the Lord of Geralt might pose a problem, he trusted the dwarf to handle it. As an elf living among humans, he would do only what any normal elf could. Soon, the scene moved to the middle of the forest. They encounter Kryas, who looked relieved to see them.
Brother,
Observing the situation, Asir thought that Kryas did a great job at holding down the fort. Beyond that point, the forest was blanketed in mist, and any human who entered risked drowning as the fog solidified into water. The round trip to fetch Martina had taken nearly a month, and the prolonged effort must have been exhausting. Asir thought to himself that the man had done an excellent job. Once Irina returns, everyone would head to the safest location, since that area was far too dangerous for humans. Asir began leaving the location. Soon, he saw something familiar and apologized for the delay. The scene shifted to Irina confronting the water spirit bravely. Asir is amazed of how far she has come in terms of talking to spirits. It made him genuinely proud to call her an acquaintance. Realizing Asir had arrived, the girl began to cry, pleading with him to stay away. But Asir gently reassured her, "It's all right. Leave the rest to me." He added that, since she had been paying all his lodging fees, he should at least repay her in some way. "Your teammates are waiting for you," he reminded her. Irene took a deep breath, composed herself, and began walking toward her companions. Asir then turned to the spirit. "What has been troubling you so much?" he asked. The spirit did not seem happy. She began to recount her story. Long ago, the indigenous people of the region had held a profound respect for nature, including the spirit of spring, who even communicated with them directly. When the land was invaded, the surviving members of the tribe were integrated into the new culture, though they never abandoned their faith. Their descendants strongly opposed the mining project and were subsequently exiled. The spirit explained that she could not intervene unless specifically called upon, and the tribe did not want to involve her in the conflict. Yet she could not allow the pollution to continue. Eventually, someone precious appeared and resolved the situation. For the sake of that girl and the world she lived in, the spirit believed evil must be completely driven away. After listening to the entire story, Asir reflected. He could see that the spirit had already made up her mind, and he fully sympathized with her feelings. Still, he knew this path was dangerous. "I understand your anger," he said, "but if you act on it blindly, the weak and innocent will suffer. Some workers act only with the purest intentions, unaware of the harm they cause. There are also innocent babies, cared for by their mothers, who know nothing of good or evil." He continued, "If you continue down this path, you will no longer be the spirit they revere. As for the pollution, I already have a friend working to fix it. Direct your anger in the right way." Time passed, and the city of Geralt was ultimately saved. The Blacksmith Guild implemented a solution for the mine, ensuring that any further development would require their approval. The true cause of the incident was revealed, and everything was resolved. The noble responsible for the mine's problems was held fully accountable, dismissed from his position, and the exiled indigenous people were allowed to return. Later, the former lord passed away, and the same fate befell the lord appointed just 3 days after him. Rumors spread that the dismissed lord had held a grudge against the king, and some claimed he sacrificed his own life to cast a curse, but the truth remained unknown. 3 years later, Asir had begun forging once more. One day, a boy approached his workshop, seeking armor that would complement a weapon he had purchased. Asir smiled inwardly. He realized it was a weapon he himself had made. If the boy could wield it with one hand, a shield would be ideal, and leather boots would help him maintain balance. Asir thought to himself that he was a solid young man, likely to become a great adventurer. If things went well, he would save up enough money to return and obtain even better equipment. And if that day came, perhaps he would once again seek out Asir's craftsmanship. That was something Asir would love to see. The boy's name, Asura, was already a story in itself, and Asir hoped to meet him again. The scene shifted to another location. Asir was back at his forge. Another part of his work involved analyzing items, studying their properties and craftsmanship. Over time, he even cut his hair, embracing the changes in his life and seeming to genuinely enjoy his days. A decade passed since he began training as a blacksmith. The dwarf, who had been his mentor all those years, even began speaking about marriage. Mentioning a fiancé, Asir was astonished. 90 years for a dwarf was roughly equivalent to a human in their late 20s. The dwarf's words startled him, but the older craftsman quickly became slightly irritated. One day, Asir, he said, "You'll have to think about your own future too." Asir realized that time was indeed approaching. Over the past 10 years, the dwarf had taken on many students, many skilled enough to run their own workshops. Even if the dwarf were to leave, the city of Vor wouldn't lack blacksmiths. The seeds he had planted had grown into magnificent trees. Asir reflected on his own journey and realized that starting as a complete novice under a dwarf's tutelage had been bold, even arrogant. Yet the dwarf had accepted him anyway, believing in a genuine connection. The changes of the decade weren't limited to blacksmithing. Irene's group had risen to the top, achieving 7-star status, though they disbanded 3 years prior. Warrior Cuz and Priestess Martina had married, retired, and now dedicated themselves to training the next generation. Asir thought that was the right way to do things. Irene had gone to the city in search of new companions, bidding him farewell with a smile and a flood of warnings, almost motherly in tone. Rodner, the first person Asir had met in Vor, had climbed the ranks to become captain of the guard, and even now they still enjoyed sharing drinks and conversation. Time moved on. Asura, he had grown into a capable warrior, his skills earned through his own merit. He had a long journey ahead, but he was undeniably solid. Asir smiled, reflecting on the past 10 years. The life he had lived in the previous 150 years felt pale in comparison to what he had experienced now. In another scene, the dwarf asked Asir what he planned to do when he returned to the Dwarven Kingdom. "I might train in swordsmanship, maybe even sorcery," Asir replied. "I have enough money saved up, so perhaps I'll look for a place to study that in the royal capital." The dwarf raised an eyebrow. "Aren't spirit-related abilities already a form of sorcery?" The dwarf called out to him, voice steady but warm. "You are without a doubt my best student. You will always be my friend, and that will never change." Asir blinked, surprised. He laughed. "What was that supposed to be? That's not like you at all." He reminded himself that he was a high elf and might not be able to visit the Dwarven Kingdom anytime soon. Yet he knew, without a doubt, that the dwarf was a friend he could never forget. The dwarf smirked. "And who's acting strange now?" Right after the dwarf punched Asir in the stomach, he said with a grin, "If I'm the best blacksmith in the country, I'll be crowned king. Once I'm on the throne, They'll make it so that elves can come and go as they please. When that day comes, be proud and introduce yourself as my apprentice. Remember, the forge is the heart of dwarven culture. Through skill alone, you can reach any position, even the throne. Time passed. The blacksmith shop his master had left behind was now run by one of his other students, but Asur borrowed it briefly to craft a knife. The master had officially licensed him as an advanced-level blacksmith, a license Asur had practically had to pry from the hands of the guild's dwarves. With that, he was prepared for his journey, packing both his adventurer's license and the knife. He was about to leave the city knowing the royal capital was about 10 days away by carriage, and even longer on foot. Yet he chose to walk, wanting to reflect on the past 10 years and the life he had lived. In the royal capital, Asur is stopped and questioned by a man. Here to learn swordsmanship and sorcery? He asked, smiling. Quite the eccentric type, aren't you? Asur took a map and continued on. The royal capital, Orpheus, lay at the very center of the kingdom of Ludria. It was far more bustling and wealthy than Vicar, a city alive with activity and opportunity. Asur thought about the three main swordsmanship schools in Orpheus, collectively known as the three disciplines: the Ludrian royal style, the Lucran greatsword style, and the heavy style. He recalled hearing of another style, though it had apparently collapsed from lack of disciples. He wondered which he would choose, should the need arise. Ahead, a street performer caught his attention. But in that moment, Asur froze. A girl in front of him drew her sword and sliced a fruit cleanly. He blinked, stunned. It wasn't that the blade was dull. He simply had no idea how she achieved such a perfect cut. Though he saw it with his own eyes, he couldn't deny the elegance and precision in the swing of her sword. Asur approached her table and placed a silver coin down. The girl looked at him, surprised. Bowing deeply, he said, "Your technique has completely captured my heart. I wish to be your apprentice." The girl blinked, confused. "I'll pay tuition," Asur added earnestly. "I'll even take on chores." Even so, she hesitated, unsure what to say. Asur admitted he still didn't know which style she practiced, but he wanted to become someone who could wield her sword. "I understand," the girl finally said. "I'll take you to my dojo, but I'm certain you'll change your mind once you see it for yourself." The scene shifted to another house. The girl explained that this was one of the 4 disciplines he could study, known as the Yoshiro Dojo. However, the head of the school had been defeated by the Lajian school, though they had used wooden swords in the match. The blow had been so powerful that the master lost his life. Other students had tried to revive the dojo, but internal disputes over who should succeed as master led to failure. Their attempts at revenge were crushed, and the dojo never recovered. Her mother and she were ignored and spared, marking the end of the place once known as a dojo. The location now held value only for performance, not combat. Her style was all that remained of her father's teachings, though she had developed her own method. However, learning her style could attract unwanted attention from the Lodred school. She initially asked Asur to go his own way, but Asur refused. "It's all right," he said. "The style you displayed is exactly what I want to learn. I don't know how strong the Lodred students are, but I'm not afraid. Before we begin, though, let me work on your sword for a week. It can't keep up with the way you move." The girl, surprised, asked who he was. Asur replied, "I'm an elf skilled in archery and spirit communication, and I'm also a blacksmith. I will be the first apprentice of the reborn Leo Sudra school." At that moment, Kaya's mother appeared and asked if there was another guest. The girl replied that there wasn't. Asur would be officially accepted as an apprentice starting that day. Time passed quickly, and things became very busy. Kaya's mother suffered from a chest condition, so Asur went into the forest to gather medicinal herbs. Meanwhile, Kaya performed on the street to earn money for her mother's medicine. Since Asur was somewhat of a specialist in that area, he chose to help her save time and resources. He also began visiting the blacksmith guild whenever he had free time, working both on Kaya's sword and his own. He even took on jobs from the guild. Asur thought it wise to make connections, as they might prove useful in the future. Rumors spread that an elf had enrolled in a local school, drawing attention like moths to a flame. If anything happened to Kaiha and her mother, their training would be disrupted. Though it wasn't officially his duty to protect them, Asir acted according to his own sense of responsibility. He no longer had time to study magic, but then a message arrived from Kreyas. He still preferred to avoid drawing attention from the Lodran students and asked Asir to keep them away quietly. The message added that the Lodran school should be left to him, and if anything happened, they were to contact him before taking any destructive action. Kreyas would soon arrive in the city of Warful to handle matters in person. The conflict with the Yoshiro school had happened while Kreyas was away on an adventure, yet he was still technically a student of the Lodran school. Asir also reflected on how Kaiha and her mother would react to seeing Kreyas in that place. Amid his thoughts, Asir considered why elves often chose to remain so reclusive. Yet he still wanted to connect with people. After all, he had never seen anything as beautiful as that smile.
Man, shut your bitch ass up!
Finally, his training began. It was actually quite simple, essentially consisting of practicing sword swings and imitating the girl beside him. Since Kaiha had never taught anyone before, these were the only foundational exercises she could offer. And it definitely wasn't how you should teach a beginner. Training was like forging. You had to make adjustments from one side and then the other until the form was complete. But Asir had all the time in the world, so he could take it slow. About half a year into his training, Kreyas appeared. He had passed by the Loden school before coming to the dojo and had listened to what Kaiha had to say. Kreyas bowed down and apologized. Seeing this, Kaiha and her mom were surprised, viewing Kreyas as a noble warrior. He ended up spending the night in the guest room. Time passed. Kreyas was preparing to leave. Before he did, Kaiha requested a training match. Surprisingly, Kreyas agreed. However, Kaiha was easily defeated, left completely helpless before him. Kreyas remarked that the only thing missing from her skill level was experience and real-world practice, something Kreyas had in Abu dance, though not everyone needed it. Meanwhile, Asir reflected on his own training. Progress was slow, but he assumed that didn't matter. If Kaiha's swordsmanship was imperfect, so would his be. Kreyas suggested that she become an adventurer for at least 2 years, noting that the strongest person he knew had been beside her all along. One day, the girl called for Asir. "You've done favor after favor for us," she said, "but I have one more favor to ask. I want to become an adventurer, and I want you to take care of my mother." Asir set 2 conditions. First, he would make a suit of armor for her before she left. Second, she would use his house in the city of Viscourt as her base of operations. Asir thought to himself that Kaiha was still a very naive young girl. If she lived in his home, everyone he knew could help care for her. He hoped she could continue training and growing even as she adapted to her new life. He reflected that perhaps this was how Irene had felt long ago. Kaiha accepted the offer. "I'll become a swordswoman worthy of being your master. Please wait just a little longer," she promised. 3 years passed. Asir practiced at the completely restored dojo, always alone. He had sworn to protect Kaiha's mother, so he never left her side, even building a forge and restoring the dojo without spending a single coin. His blacksmithing skills had grown immensely since he began training, and he had even been invited to a competition to present his finest work to the king. Last year, he placed 3rd. This year, 2nd, beaten only by dwarves. Perhaps the noble vandals who once bothered him would leave him alone once they realized he was more stubborn than any dwarf. Meanwhile, Kaiha's mother appeared with a letter. Asir noted that every 2 or 3 months, a letter arrived from her daughter. Stories of the first time she ate bear meat with her bare hands, or tales of an adventurer accompanying her. Kaiha's mother wondered aloud what could be in this latest letter. Asir smiled. Maybe she's ranked up again. In her first year, she reached 4 stars. In her second, 5. She's advancing quickly for someone working solo. Asir worried that Kaiha might be progressing too fast, but he knew Kuz was watching over her. What was happening now, however, was the blossoming of a solid foundation, nurtured through real-world experience. Still, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy that Kreyas got to witness it firsthand. Kaiha's mother was surprised by a letter, and Asir smiled upon seeing the news. The girl had been promoted to a 6-star adventurer. Very soon, she would be returning home. He concluded that it would be 3 years before they saw her again. Time passed once more. Asir worked diligently at his forge when Kaiha's mother called out, "Dinner's ready." The scene shifted to her wondering when her daughter would finally return home. Asir, surprised, realized she must have been preparing a feast every single day. Determined not to let it go to waste, he ate every last bite, each mouthful deepening his hope that Kaiha would soon come home. At that very moment, a spirit appeared. Asir had already sensed its presence. The spirit told him he must leave for a moment. Asir ran outside to the gate. There, a silhouette appeared. Asir was astonished. Kaiha had already returned. In a matter of seconds, she rushed toward him. He felt certain of something. When her sword shattered against his own, he realized those 3 years had not been wasted. In such a short time, she had grown, blossoming like a breathtaking flower. Asir also noticed another girl present, Irina, who apparently was not pleased. He asked if she required his power. The scene shifted again. Irina appeared, saying it had been a while, but she still needed his help. She explained that Kryas had introduced Kaiha to guide her to him. In the name of the elves, she required his assistance. Several Ludrian nobles have been capturing and imprisoning elves. Asir wondered how humans could so easily overpower them. Irina asked whether the only elves he knew were misfits working as adventurers, or perhaps those living deep in the forests. Common elves outside the great sea of trees were not accustomed to combat. Being able to speak with spirits was one thing, but surviving in battle was entirely different. It was not impossible for humans to capture elves. These nobles have been invading elven villages in their territories with private armies. The villages were so insular and isolated that most outsiders never noticed. Captured elves were subjected to isolation, kept from seeing anything, and regularly administered substances to disorient their senses. They could no longer form connections with the spirits and were forced to rely entirely on humans, treated like animals. Asir felt disheartened. Elves were adaptable and undeniably alluring, yet he could not understand the desire to control them. He could, however, understand why elves in particular were so highly valued. Some of the nobles responsible were among the most powerful in the country, controlling the entire eastern region. The kingdom's government must be aware of what's happening, yet they had done nothing. Irina was certain of one thing. Punishing key figures in the country carried serious consequences. Secretly owning people as a means of command had become a status symbol among the nobility, and in truth, they might even try to legalize it. Observing the situation, Asir remained silent. He knew she didn't exactly need his power. Humans could forget the pain endured over generations. To ensure elves never suffered in this way again, something must be done. That pain needed to be carved into the kingdom itself. The rage of the elves, provoked for so long, had to be made crystal clear, and he would see to it personally. Irina said she would rescue the captured elves while he took action. If the truth were exposed, they might convince all the elves in the country to abandon their forests and migrate elsewhere. Elves thrived in forests where the influence of nature was strongest, but if they left, the land would be overrun by monsters reproducing uncontrollably. These monsters would eventually spill into the forests themselves, which explained why elves refused to part with the lands they loved so dearly. Asir, however, resolved that he would convince the elves to migrate. Things had already reached a critical point. Irina bowed her head, and he gently asked her to lift it. If it came to that, he could no longer live in this country. One truth remained. Neither he nor she was to blame for this. Then Kaiha grabbed his arm. "I haven't taught you anything yet. You became my apprentice. You even healed my mother's illness. I still need to thank you for the past 3 years, even though I haven't done a single thing to help you." Asir was surprised. Then he smiled. "Your earlier strike is still engraved in my eyes. I've followed your example every step of the way. Don't say you haven't taught me anything. You've already done far more for me than I ever did for you. If that's not enough, continue walking the path you've chosen. Pass it on to new disciples, or even to your child if you ever have one. Decades may pass, and even if you're no longer here, someone who inherits your blade will continue to learn from you." Irina still had her head bowed. She wasn't just apologizing to him. She was apologizing to Kaiha for likely not letting her know her intentions. Asur gently took her hand. Kaiha vowed to further improve her sword and pass it on to a successor, but she reminded him that she was still his master. "You must come back to see it while I'm still alive," she said. Asur smiled and bowed to her. The scene shifted. Asur thought back to the forest he had carved a path through, a forest once inhabited by elves, now ravaged by the private army of the Marquis. The preparations had taken half a year, and he deeply sympathized with all the elves who had endured being commanded by humans for so long. Still, he could not act without prior preparation. He had considered approaching the spirit he knew to ask for help, but the collateral damage would have been far too great. Asur also considered calling upon the wind and fire spirits to create a whirlwind of fire and wind across the noble's domain. But that would cost countless lives and risk igniting a full-scale conflict between humans and elves. The spectacle needed to be grand, yet cause minimal actual harm. He began to meditate, summoning the spirits, and placed his hand firmly on the ground. He intended to create a tremor, drawing on his experience from a past life. He knew it wouldn't be a quake that could truly devastate, but for those who had never experienced anything like it, the effect would be terrifying. The tremor would not only unsettle the nobility, but also strike fear into the hearts of the innocent. Perhaps the widespread terror would transform into fury, and those responsible would feel it firsthand. Using the tremor as a signal, elven adventurers could move to rescue their captured brethren, initiating a mass exodus from their beloved forests. The forest would soon be flooded with monsters, and the kingdom would likely issue a formal apology. Only then could this event be recorded in history, ensuring such a tragedy would never recur. Irina would serve as the main point of contact for negotiations, and as the highest-ranked adventurer, she would compel Ludria to tread carefully. Yet a problem remained. Any rescued elves who were pregnant could perpetuate the tragedy. Half-elves, due to their mixed blood, struggled to communicate with spirits, and their lifespans and growth rates differed from full elves. Asur had done all he could to explain why this custom made no sense, but he could not be sure anyone would truly understand. In any case, he could no longer remain in that country. He paused, realizing he had never truly mastered magic. Wondering where he should go next, he glanced at his blade. It calmed his stormy thoughts, a tangible reminder of the choices he had made in Ludria and the resolve he carried with him. For a moment, he allowed himself to stop thinking, swinging his sword with deadly focus, carrying the weight of his responsibility. As he departed, he gazed at the sea. South of Ludria lay Poloya, and even farther beyond, the Republic of Valstrika faced the ocean. It was a small country, but it thrived on maritime trade, governed by a parliamentary assembly of nobles and an elected sovereign. Border clashes with Poloya were frequent, as the Polosians sought access to the sea. Ludria exported food to sustain Poloya, creating ongoing tension. Ludria, however, was far wealthier. The idea that people might have to fight for something as basic as clean water was foreign to him. But he silently prayed for the young woman who had once shared her water with him, all for the sake of her village. As for why he had traveled so far, that was another story. Since leaving Ludria, much had happened, and he simply wanted to reach a place where he could breathe freely, behold the open sea, and indulge in seafood. A guard, noticing him, said, "You're clearly not a spy," and apologized for the thorough evaluation. Northern travelers had caused many problems, he explained, but he welcomed the elf to the city of Shroth. "Here," he said, "you'll find seafood quite extraordinary." The scene shifts to a bustling seaside district. Asur walks through narrow streets, lined with old wooden buildings, the salty scent of the ocean lingering in the air. He glances around, thinking this must be where the local fishermen gather, a place where they drink, trade stories, and feast on freshly caught fish. Spotting a lively tavern, he steps inside. The warm scent of grilled seafood washes over him. The dimly lit interior is filled with rough-looking sailors laughing, shouting, and clinking mugs. Asir heads toward the counter where a young woman is wiping down glasses. "Mind if I sit here?" he asks politely. She looks up, surprised to see him. "Oh, an elf? And a handsome one at that? Sure, take a seat." Asir nods and sits. "So, what can I get you?" she asks with a bright smile. "I'll have your best grilled fish," Asir replies, "and something strong to drink with it." The girl arches an eyebrow, smirking. "Quite the appetite for someone your size. Guess you're stronger than you look."
Pause!
So disrespectful! That shit got me so hot!
Time passes and the food arrives. He's impressed by the meal, quickly taking a bite. It's delicious. The drink is just as good, and for a moment he relaxes. He notices the woman smiling at him as he eats, but before anything more can happen, a loud noise cuts through the tavern. A man strikes another, sending him crashing to the ground right in front of the woman. Asir instinctively steps forward to shield her, but his fish slips from his hand, the plate breaking on the floor. The man smirks, saying, "That's how rough sailors communicate." Asir stares at the broken meal, irritation flashing across his face. "You ruined my fish," he mutters, before punching the man and demanding an apology. The man, confused, asks what he's doing, but Asir insists again. He wants an apology for the fish. The fight breaks out, spreading chaos across the tavern. Time passes. Both men stand before the tavern owner, apologizing. The young woman explains that Asir was only trying to protect her, but the owner cuts her off. The other man insists that he's the one to blame, saying he ruined Asir's day. But the tavern owner won't let it slide so easily. He scolds the man, saying he's caused too much trouble already, that they've known each other for years, and warning that he's close to finally punching him himself. The man tries to excuse his behavior, saying the troublemaker was insulting the food. Hearing this, Asir is taken aback. He quickly apologizes, admitting that good food is worth fighting over, but he shouldn't have lashed out. The fisherman grins, saying now Asir speaks his language. A ruined meal deserves punishment. He asks if Asir plans to stay in town, suggesting that catching fish together would make things even. The tavern owner sighs, saying Asir still has to pay for the broken benches and tables. Drizzy, the fisherman, laughs and adds that if Asir does go fishing, he should let him handle the cooking next time. Reflecting on the day, Asir realizes he's already crossed paths with three important people: Karina, the waitress, Drizzy, the fisherman, and Grande, the tavern owner. Yet one detail troubles him. The man Drizzy struck earlier, the one who insulted the tavern's food, vanished without a trace. Didn't Drizzy say he was with some trading company? Asir wonders. He flexes his arm, feeling the dull ache from the fight, and frowns. I need to be more careful. Not only would an injury affect Asir's blacksmithing, but it would also hinder his swordsmanship. That would be unfair to both. He sighs, thinking that if that old dwarf were here, he'd probably scold him, saying he isn't training enough. Even so, all Asir wants right now is to lie in bed and promise himself he'll start early tomorrow. Time passes, and daylight finally spills across the city streets. Asir is already wandering through the harbor district, hoping Drizzy manages to catch something today. Soon enough, he spots him, but notices a commotion unfolding nearby. It's a dispute, and at the center of it all is the rude man from yesterday. Asir approaches, asking if things really aren't so bad after all, since he had actually planned to accept Drizzy's offer today. But before he can get an answer, another man steps in front of him, saying this has nothing to do with him. Suddenly, someone strikes the man with something. It's unclear what, but the chaos spreads quickly. Asir tells the man to step aside, saying he's here to talk to Drizzy, warning him that it isn't worth provoking him. He thinks to himself that sea spirits are far more useful than any of these troublemakers realize. Then one of the men spits back that they're the ones who started it, claiming outsiders like Asir have no right to interfere with their revenge. Observing quietly, Asir pieces it together. They deliberately messed with Drizzy last night, just so they'd have an excuse to target him again today. In the middle of this tense standoff, one thought crosses his mind. I'm way too hungry for this right now. Before he can dwell on it, one of them lunges at him. Asura barely dodges, reacting on instinct. In an instant, he summons his spirits. Energy surges around him, striking all of them at once, and even sending one unlucky man tumbling straight into the water. Drizzy, stunned, whistles. Kid's actually pretty tough. Why'd you let me land so many hits last night? You could have taken me down instantly if you did that. Asura shakes his head, replying that he doesn't need spirits to win a hand-to-hand fight. Then he asks if Drizzy would call a bunch of friends just to gang up on one person, because that's seriously cowardly. Hearing that, Drizzy grins, clapping him on the shoulder. He says he owes Asura one, mentioning they're almost ready to head out and asking if he has any requests. Time passes, and the scene shifts back to the tavern. Asura sits at a table, eating while wishing he had a drink to go with the meal. Just by asking around in this place, he's learned a lot about what's happening in the city. Merchants are constantly coming and going on large ships, and this constant movement has stirred conflict over the use of the port. For generations, the Pastelli family has unified the fishermen, maintaining their livelihood and forging alliances with prominent merchants, even earning the backing of a powerful noble house. But another force opposes them, the Tratrine family, which controls many influential trading companies. As business grew, fish sales soared, and the fishermen's profits rose alongside them. But the problem was inevitable. The port is too small to handle all the activity. Asura isn't sure if this is a common problem in coastal towns, but here, it's the root of nearly every conflict. The scene shifts again. Asura reflects on what he's learned. Drizzy seems to be something like a leader among the younger fishermen, which makes him a prime target. The attack earlier was likely an attempt to kill him and make an example out of him. Lorette, whoever is pulling the strings, probably planned to demoralize the fishermen by taking Drizzy out. It's a grim situation, but not entirely surprising. Asura can't bring himself to call anyone truly evil here. Everyone's tangled in a web of survival. After all, the fishermen and merchants rely on each other to keep this city alive. The kingdom of Lorette had even sent a letter of apology, requesting a visit, but this was already Asura's fourth day in the city. He had heard the place was ruthless and willing to do anything for profit, so he ignored it entirely. The scene shifts. Asura doubted they had come to apologize.
Well, no fucking shit.
Without hesitation, he summoned his earth spirits. The ground trembled beneath their feet as jagged stone erupted upward, striking all of them at once and taking them down with ease. With one more favor from his spirits, the ground split beneath the fallen attackers, tossing them hard into the dirt. By the end of it, Asura had captured a total of 10 people, his attackers and the men who came trying to dig them out. There's no excuse for this many people to be after me, he thought grimly. When the city guards investigated the incident, the truth came out. Lorette had been harassing the local fishermen for months. In the end, the kingdom was forced to answer for its crimes, and the Tratrine family abandoned them. There was also a trading company that had tried to kill a traveler and failed. Overnight, they became a liability for the Tratrine family. Even so, the city's problems weren't over. Both the Tratrine and Pastelli families had quietly allowed their people to keep fighting, so nothing really changed. To Asura, it felt like the entire situation had been planned from the start. Someone had used him. But even so, he didn't care to dwell on it. For now, he was content to enjoy good food and drink at the tavern where he'd been staying. That would be his last night there. The scene returns to the tavern. You really seem to enjoy that food, Karina said with a smile. More and more people have been asking for it lately. We've been busier than ever. Asura set down his fork. Expect even more people to come. I'm sure Grande will add more things to the menu soon. He mentioned that she was always busy anyway and told her he'd be leaving soon, which would probably lighten her workload. But even as he spoke, a thought lingered. For as long as I've been in this city, I've felt someone's eyes on me. Even after the city's situation had been resolved, those eyes never disappeared. And now, as he glanced at Karina, realization struck him. She'd been the one watching him all along. She likely had a network of spies scattered throughout the city. Whether Grande was involved or not, Asura was certain Karina had orchestrated much more than she let on. His first impression of her was that she was a thief. He had been right. "We'll miss you when you're gone," Karina said softly. "I'll be back someday," Asir replied. "I'm heading northeast to the land of sorcery." Karina's eyes lit up, and she smiled. "Then we'll meet again." His next destination is Set, Odine, one of the many small countries that make up the Eastern United League. The entire region was once part of the Azed Empire, and that's how it became a collection of small countries and city-states. Yet, somehow, these little nations have managed to avoid being swallowed up by larger powers. They formed an alliance to repel foreign invasions, bound together by an agreement that ensures mutual protection. Odine, however, is unique. It was founded as a sanctuary for magic study and the training of powerful sorcerers capable of changing the course of war. It's completely independent. No city-state can monopolize it. One of Ashier's goals there is simple: to learn magic. Odine offers endless opportunities to find a great magic tutor, and even if he can't, just traveling through the land of sorcery will satisfy his curiosity. The scene shifts again. An old man asks if he needs a ride, but the protagonist declines. He says he prefers walking and enjoying his travels, thinking to himself that wagons make him severely motion sick. He recently sent a letter to Irene, saying he was heading to the City of Magic, and if she was anywhere nearby, he's sure she'll find a way to contact him. Meanwhile, he wonders whether boats would make him sick as well. If not, it would greatly expand his travel options. If he ever returns to the city of Sorath, he plans to ask Drizzy for a ride. Soon after, he arrives at the city gates. This time, he plans to use his blacksmith license to enter. He doesn't intend to stay long, but he wants to practice smithing. It's been a while since his last attempt. Spreading his name around would also reduce suspicion among the guards. That night, he stops at an inn. A girl asks if he's there for dinner or a room. "Both," the protagonist replies, admitting he's hungry, explaining that a room costs 50 copper and dinner with breakfast included is 12. Ashier takes off his hat, and the girl suddenly freezes, surprised to see he's an elf. She quickly leads him upstairs, asking him to drop off his bags before returning for dinner. As they walk, she sneaks sideways glances at him before blurting out, "Are you an elf?"
Mind your business!
Immediately realizing her mistake, she apologizes, thinking she shouldn't bother a guest with such a question. The protagonist smiles, replying that he is indeed an elf, and asks if it's her first time seeing one. She nods, saying she's seen elves pass through before, but never hosted one as a guest. She finally shows him to his room, warning him not to lose the key. Looking around, Ashier thinks it's a bit rustic, but the bed is decent for the price. The view from a window is surprisingly beautiful. He considers staying longer, but that'll depend on how good the food is. The next scene cuts to him eating dinner. He loves it. The same girl asks if he enjoyed the meal, and he nods, thinking the food is far better than expected. Later, in the blacksmithing district, another man tells him he'll find everything he needs there. Asir thinks to himself that a simple job like this is all they're willing to entrust to a wanderer. Surprisingly, his advanced class status from Lydia and even the name of a famous dwarf don't seem to count for much here. Looking at the blade in his hands, he notices the craftsmanship is rough. Odine may be the land of sorcery, but when it comes to smithing, it's not exactly renowned. They needed 10 of those within a week, but there wasn't really an upper limit to the request. Perfecting the design with as many as he could make wouldn't hurt. Time passed after that dull conversation, and several people watched the protagonist as he worked. Finally, the boy set his tools down, saying he was finished for the day and would continue tomorrow. Apparently, the people were pleased with his presence. Maybe just curious, but still, the compliments were nice. He allowed himself a small smile. A memory flashed through his mind, that stubborn dwarf arguing with him. He realized he missed his master's scolding. But from a high elf's perspective, it really hadn't been that long since they parted. The scene shifted to the city. Acer noticed how fertile the land was and how close-knit the people seemed. He was still walking with the girl from the inn, who was, at the moment, staring at a cake in a shop window. That day, he'd been strolling casually, letting her guide him around. Since she was free, he'd invited her along with the promise of getting sweets. And speaking of that, Talking about a 10-year-old girl like this would have gotten him arrested in his previous life. It had been a week since he'd arrived, and he still relied on a guide. 6 days of work and 1 day of rest. That was his routine here. Even so, the blacksmith at the shop looked surprised when Asura said he'd be taking a day off. He didn't yet have a proper sense of how the spear would balance just by shaping the tips, but complaining wouldn't change anything, so he pushed on with the task. Meanwhile, the girl had finally gotten her cake, happily eating away. "It's really good," she said with her mouth full. Asura cleaned her up a little, saying she was making a mess, while thinking to himself that even in this land of abundance, sweets were expensive. The girl had been born and raised here, yet had never eaten cake before. He thought back to the days when he used to eat the same bland thing every day. Compared to that, being able to enjoy this kind of variety now made him feel richer in spirit. But, of course, not everyone was ready to enjoy that kind of wealth. Then he overheard a conversation nearby. "The Druidian army is invading northern Zaire," one man said. Hearing that, Asura recalled what he knew. Northern Zaire was a militaristic, mercenary-driven country, and the Dujans were nomads with a powerful cavalry. The girl tugged at his sleeve, watching his expression. "Is something wrong?" Asura smiled faintly. "Of course not." He handed her a piece of cake. "You can have half." Surprised, she accepted it and kept eating. But Asura's expression darkened as his thoughts turned inward. If he wanted full details, he needed to ask the Adventurers Guild tomorrow.